Our next session is called Jeena Yahan, Marna Yahan. It's a discussion on cinema and its addictive hold on all involved. We have with us Padmavati Rao, who is an actor, writer, director, translator, and poet. Thank you so much for joining us, Padmavati. We also have M.K. Raghavendra, who is a writer on culture, literature, and politics, and much of his writing is focused on cinema. He's also the writer of the book on international cinema, Locating World Cinema. Thank you for joining us. We have with us Vidya Shankar, who is the founder member and presently the artistic director of the Bangalore International Film Festival. Thank you for joining us, Vidya Shankar. And to moderate this session, we have with us Samantha Bhadra, who is a poet, a TEDx speaker, and also runs a branding, marketing, and art consulting company called The Sound. With that, before we get started, if there are audience questions, please feel free to use the Q&A section. And if folks in the audience want to ask questions later, please let us know and you can use this mic. With that, over to you, Samantha.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for attending the session, being here today with us on a lovely Sunday afternoon, if I might say that. What we have here today is a very unique, let me use the word concoction. That is also because, what we have, Mr. Raghavendra ji, who is a critique, Vidya Shankar, who is a curator, and Padmavati, who is an actor. So we're not really having, by essence, even before the conversation today itself, we know that we'll get a certain type of colorful conversation, or probably a layered conversation, probably what one might call three-dimensional, for want of better phrases or words. From that perspective, I welcome you all to this conversation. I personally am really looking forward to it, frankly speaking, and it would be really lovely to understand, probably, when you say Jeena Yahan, Marna Yahan, it's a very ironic take, considering the conversation that we wish to have around political and gender issues in Indian cinema, as is. Without further ado, really, I'd love to probably, address the elephant in the room. This question, which essentially talks about, over time in Indian cinema, we've seen, Indian cinema trying to glorify, talk about, sing praises, about an ideal sort of life. About helping the masses kind of, live an alternate reality for them to feel better, for them to kind of forget reality for a while. And in that effort, in that effort to help the masses get out of the drudgery of everyday life, do you think there have been some compromises in the process? Do you think, in a sense, maybe, Indian cinema, for example, has not been able to inform politics in the way it could have potentially done? So I leave it for you to, would love to know your thoughts on this piece.
Okay, so first of all, I must admit that I'm not an academician. I have not studied cinema. I'm not a pandit, I'm not a Gyani. But yes, I am from the industry. And so I would like to talk about it from my experience of it. So the first film I did was when I was 15. And I've had the good fortune of knowing an amazing filmmaker from Bollywood in my growing years, and that was Nazir Hussain Saab. And I used to call him Chacha Jaan. And I remember I had just finished Vandanandu, and so what I speak here today has not been told to any magazine or any journalist ever. This you will be hearing only here. And I remember Chacha Jaan and I sitting, and he said, "To tum apna film karke aa gayi, art cinema karke?" Because I just finished working with Girish Karnad on Vandanandu Kalatalli in Kannada. And I said, "Haan Chacha Jaan." He said, "हाँ तो ये art cinema करोगे तुम?" I said, "अभी art cinema के लिए पूछा तो कर लिया हमने, अभी वो art cinema है कि नहीं है हम नहीं जानते." So then I said, "आप नहीं बनाते?" So he said, "हम क्या बनाएंगे art cinema?" He said, "All this is very well for you to talk about, but when it comes to the masses, they don't want to see their lives on screen." And this was a man who had witnessed the partition. These were people who had built their lives from scratch at the time of the partition. And so it was, at that point of time, I was too young to understand, but I did dwell on it and I did try to understand where he was coming from. And I understood that. And he said, people don't want to see their reality. It does not entertain them. And therefore, we need to make cinema that keeps the masses also going, and which he did very well. Nasir Hussain's films, if you see all his films, right from Baharon Ke Sapne or Jewel Thief or Karwan, you know, or even Zamane Ko Dikhana Hai and other films. He really had mastered the art of what, he had the pulse, right, of what people want. And in that, I think these were people who were probably, yes, running away in a way from reality. One could say that they were helping people to run away from reality. But on the other hand, they were living out the politics of the time, you know. So I would leave it at that and say that, yeah, it's not that there was a compromise. I think there was a very intentional effort to do so, at least at that point of time. Maybe later, when cinema also, you know, came to a certain point, because if we're talking of the 70s, India is a nation, an independent nation. 47, we've got independence, right? 25 years old as an independent nation. But if you talk of politics per se, there were statements being made, whether it is through gender, if you look at the kind of stand that, or bold roles that someone like Shobna Samarth took in those times in Marathi cinema. It's, I mean, even today we don't have that kind of thing happening, you know. So, yeah, I think it was a matter of choice at that point of time. It might be a compromise today.
Very interesting thread to hold on. Would love to hear.
I'll take you the questions you have raised and respond to that. And I'll leave to the critiquing of Indian cinema through gender and politics to my friend Raghavendra here. What I would like to speak is the context, the historical context of Indian cinema and the political interventions it has made into cinema. And as for the gender issues also, I'll just touch upon it. It's a very short presentation. You see, if you look at the history of cinema from the beginning itself, very early stages of cinema, it took a political positioning. Like if you look at cinema in Russia in the early part of it, Bolsheviks used cinema as a tool for political activism. Then a little later, we could see that, you know, the fascists used cinema as a soft tool for political. And later, the Nazis in the 30s and 40s used cinema as almost a powerful tool for political, propagating their political agenda. If you see Nazi films, it's very, very shocking. And they used cinema completely, the maximum utilization of cinema for impact on the population was done by the Nazis during the 30s and 40s. That means there is cinema starts with a political context. It has, in fact, it is not a very, it is a very dubious past as far as the political, this one is concerned. At the same time, you look at the political leadership in India, the evolving political leadership in India at that point of time. If you look at Gandhiji, he had almost, he has a total aversion to cinema. Why cinema? What Madam talked about, we didn't take that, the position about cinema, is essentially comes from the political leadership in the early stages. Like Gandhiji had complete aversion about cinema. In fact, I have got one statement of his which he had a very little respect for cinema.
He didn't even want to use the microphone if he had his way.
Yeah. If I will read out one of his statements, there is a very rare interview he gave it to a cinematographer's act. I mean, there is a discussion on cinematographer's act sometime in the 30s, and he was interviewed for that. And one of his statements, I'm going to read it to you. That gives the picture of why Indian cinema from the beginning was not tuned to using it as a tool for political discourses. From the very early stages. It was not used for political, essentially because the political leadership in early part of Indian evolution of political leadership had total aversion to cinema. Gandhi said, in one of the interviews, he said, I have never been to cinema. I had not seen a film actually. He didn't see it. Many people claim that he had seen a film, but he had seen only a few reels of the film, not the full film he had not seen. that was Vijay Bhatt's Ramarajya, the film which he saw. Somebody claimed that he has seen Harishchandra, but there's no evidence to that extent. What he said in that, I have never been to a cinema, but even to an outsider, the evil that it has done and is doing is patent. The good, if it has done at all, remains to be proved. That's what he says sometime during 30s. Obviously, political discourse could not happen in Indian cinema because Indian political leaders completely shunned the cinema. But we have a medium. We have a medium which is reaching out in a way. Like, today we are having social media which uses the kind of different, I was just talking about Nazi cinema. Like, today's trolls in your social media, cinema was being used that time for political ends, political agendas was being used by fascists and Bolsheviks and this one. Now, from that stage, cinema had to be outside the political discourses in India because political leadership shunned cinema in that. It is thought of an evil. Like Madam said, we are not averse to using microphone. Therefore, one of the basic fundamental opposition for Gandhiji for this one is a machine. It's a technology-driven medium. Therefore, he had that in the background. I mean, I presume that's one of the backgrounds he had. That he was against machine, where hand skill was not necessary. The kind of machines he had opposition, he put cinema also into the same bracket. Therefore, that's one aspect of it. The other thing is the commercial aspect of cinema he was shunning. When he said evil, therefore, he was talking about that aspect of it, even now it's still there. The commercial aspect of cinema, even though people have good intentions, sometimes, as Madam said, it is necessary for them to go out of that. They use cinema for a different purpose. That I'll come to a little later when this is the situation. Therefore, how do you use this medium which has come to us, which is popular with the people? People go in large number to see. Like as I said, today's social media, large number of people enter the social media because they feel that I have access to something different. Cinema was like that in the early days. Everybody wanted to see cinema because it was a new thing. We know that, what the history of cinema, how it is done. Therefore, you have to use that medium, but political leadership has shunned it. Therefore, you are behind that. Gandhiji was a very tall figure in Indian, this one. Therefore, how do you use the cinema? Or you use it for cultural reason. Cinema, even today in India, it is not cinema for in India, particularly I can say that the purpose of cinema in India is not art. Purpose of cinema in India, art is only a possibility of cinema and not its purpose. For Indian cinema, art is a possibility, but not its main purpose. Obviously, as a possibility, we are using it in a different way. As Madam said, she has participated in all those movements. It is possible that it has been used as an art form. At the same time, its purpose is also being served as a tool of evolution of what we call as the capitalist mode of market economics. Every science. Another thing is that cinema is part of both a philosophical tradition of arts and also a philosophical tradition of science. Science always depends on what you call as the next step of science is always the application of science, which is technology. Technology always survives as a mass production. It cannot survive as a individual human expressions. Therefore, it depends on a mass production. When there is mass production, there is an economic dimension that gets involved with that. Once there is an economic dimension, you always have the revenue model, we have the business model. Most of the big film people go for the business model, whereas some of the people, they have even the art filmmakers, what we call as parallel filmmakers, they have to use a revenue model. They have to get back their money to do a next film. Therefore, in that situation, what happens is that this kind of the circle, at the one side, you have to have this kind of one economic cycle, and the other side, you want to use it for a personal expression. This is the situation in which Indian cinema works. And as I said, since political leadership shunned it, we have to take alternate route of cultural expression. Cinema is a cultural expression. Any Indian cinema you take, even the regional cinemas, they're basically cultural expressions rather than artistic expression. And as Madam pointed out, also another issue is that but in the 70s, we had some changes in. If you look at the cinema before 70s, who are the villains in Indian cinema? This is a soft kind of political statement I'm trying to make. Who are the villains? The idea of evil before 70s, the smugglers, the feudal lords, then the underworld dons, dacoits, they were the villains in cinema till 70s in Indian cinema. The idea of evil and the characters were the same. You look at cinemas after 70s, I usually give this example. I remember I written it in Indian Express way back in 70s. You know, the cinema changed its villain from these characters to politicians and bureaucrats. In 70s, Ardha Satya is one pioneering film in that, you know, it changed the villains from these characters to politicians and executives. Here, the idea is not evil. The politics per se, the real politic is not evil, but the politician is evil. The characters are evil. The idea is not evil, the characters are evil. Therefore, we have shifted from the idea of evil and the characters matching prior to 70s and the anti-heroes. The dacoits became sort of a legitimized in Indian cinema. The underworld dons became legitimized in Indian cinema. This is not by, I wouldn't say that we did it intentionally. That was changing. I said that we are developing as a state nation. Things start changing. The politics, the soft side of politics and the hard side keep on changing. That's how we had this change in understanding of political. Therefore, Indian cinema, in a sense, is not directly political, but it has been making these kinds of changes in it as a political statement within it, as a cultural expression, not as an intellectual or social discourse, but as a cultural, within a cultural discourse, we are making these kinds of changes within it. This is as far as political, as far as gender issues is concerned, this applies to, I mean, the whole society, not just cinema as such. I always believe that there are two kinds of orders we have, particularly with reference to women and Dalits and backward classes in this country, is that we always talk a social order about this. Therefore, we create social changes within those, you know, the affirmative actions we do. We say that we are giving, you know, reservations, we are giving place to women, but they hit the glass ceilings very fast. Both all the marginalized sections and the deprived sections of the society hit glass ceilings very fast. Women also had the same problem outside the society and also within the cinema.
In fact, I was just thinking about it. When you mentioned Gandhi's comment about him being a little cynical about the purpose of Indian cinema, I'd like to probably hold on to that before we get into gender.
Okay.
You know, as a question.
Yeah.
I'll probably ask the panelists, like probably Raghavendra ji also, like, you know, when you say this cynicism about whether cinema can even inform politics in the first place, which was there, and how it's evolved over the years, I'd probably love to hold on to that thread and see if we can, you know, find something. You know,
Yeah.
for that probably I'll just ask.
Yeah, we will. Yeah, oh, sure.
And then come back to us.
This we will. Okay.
Can I? Your quotation from Gandhi reminds me of my own principal, Ashina Simaya. The Gandhian who talked like this. Okay.
Yeah.
No, coming back to this thing. See, it is not possible to avoid politics in any kind of popular text, right? So what do we have in common? What do people have? What does the public have in common? The public has only politics in common, right? I mean, we live in a social life. So the question is, I mean, if you're telling a story to a child, you'll have to address that aspect of the child which it's familiar with, right? Similarly, what do all of us have in common? As Indians, we have Indian politics. As Kannadigas, we have local politics. So the point is, we start studying Indian cinema, right? We start studying Indian cinema. You will find it's completely inscribed with political messages. It's not messages as much. It's a kind of neutral in the sense it doesn't take, you know, towards a political party or not. But it's the social life, political life. For example, and I discovered that when I was studying Hindi cinema in my very first book. There's this movie called Anokhi Ada. I don't know if you've heard of this. 1948, I think 48, 49. What is this movie about? Two orphans, okay, a girl and a boy, okay, they're orphans and they are befriended by a man, an anglicized man with the roses in his buttonhole who loves children. Okay, okay. What is this man with the rose in his buttonhole? And there are two men, okay, who are in love, who want to look after these orphans, okay. One is this man with the anglicized man who's called Lat Sahib, who's got a rose in his buttonhole and loves children. The other is an authoritarian figure, okay, who has a sola topi, okay. My thing is, rose in his buttonhole, Nehru, authoritarian figure, Patel. Why orphans? Can you guess why orphans? Why? The death of the father of the nation. Okay. Another movie, okay. Another movie, you have got to see this movie. I would recommend all of you see this. 1946, right? It's called Anmol Ghadi. I don't know. It's Mehboob Khan's film, Anmol Ghadi. Very interesting film. This guy is this boy. Boy is the little girl or a childhood romance, boy and girl, right? And the boy is the girl comes from a rich family. The boy comes from a poor family. The boy is presented a watch by the girl. The girl's father doesn't want her to make friends with the boy. Then it turns out this boy has got a mother. His doesn't have a father. So this boy sort of grows up, you know, and the mother brings him up, and the mother keeps on grinding wheat, making roti, feeding him, and she grows up. All the time he keeps thinking about this little girl who's gone off to the city. And then finally he wants to marry the little girl. He runs into her. She's now grown up, obviously. But they wants to marry her, but she won't. And finally, when she agrees to run away with him, at last minute she refuses. His mother, meanwhile, keeps on grinding wheat, feeding him, right? Then I said, what is this grinding wheat? What is this thing? And the mother keeps saying, Beta, don't go after rich people. Rich people are rich people. They may be good people, but don't go after them. You're your own interest. They are not interested in you. It goes on. Finally, last minute, what happens? His mother dies. Okay. This chap goes back. The rich woman deserts him. She says, I can't marry you, and marries a rich man, right? You just look at this. What is this woman as bread provider? Mother is bread provider. What does it mean? The land, right? The land provides bread. Okay. What does it say? It is, don't abandon your land and follow the rich, right? What is this? What do you make of this in 1946, right? This was made by two Muslims. One was Mehboob Khan, the other guy is the question is, the Muslim League was a party of rich people. Okay. It was telling them, don't abandon your land and follow your leaders. Hang on, okay. That's what the film is about. It's all about Hindus. Why? Because in Hindi cinema, okay, a Hindu name doesn't connote Hindu. It connotes human being, right? A Muslim connotes Muslim, right? A Hindu name just means human being. To Muslims are not Muslims, they're human beings, right? So you use the Hindu names and you use the story of Hindus. You mustn't see them as Hindus, you must see them as human beings, right? This is the thing. So the point is that this entire thing of, this entire Hindi cinema, from top to bottom, is loaded with politics, okay? Okay, the question is, the point is, it has no option but the question is, it is always dominant politics, okay? It will not, for example, you look at women, even if you look at, for example, something like Duniya Na Mane of Shantaram, Duniya Na Mane. It is, you talk gender issues, for instance. What are the gender issues in Shantaram's film? It is this woman who's forced to marry against her will. She marries this rich guy, old guy, widower or whatever. She's forced to because he's rich, he's a lawyer and all that. But the point is this, that finally, she is celebrated for performing her traditional role in society, right? You look at Queen, for instance, okay? Queen, I don't know if you've seen Queen. This woman has been abandoned by a man on the eve of her marriage, right? On the eve of her marriage, she's been abandoned by him. He says, I cannot marry you. I'm not interested in marrying you. But when he follows her and decides to marry her, okay, you find she cannot say no. She's already been dumped. She can't say no, okay? So she has to make an apology and say, I can't marry you, right? So the point is that regardless of whatever the thing of freedom of women, whatever the situation is, you will find that the ideology is a dominant ideology. There is very rarely do we find, against the dominant political viewpoint taken. Very rarely does this happen. I see, for example, something like Diwar. How does Diwar do it? You have this smuggler. In fact, I'll tell you, smuggler with the idols. What you said is very interesting thing. The smuggler smuggling idols is Western decadence. Western decadence. Why? When Indira Gandhi was against the West, right? Anti-Western policies of Indira Gandhi, right? Okay. So the question is, you have this guy with this smuggler in a blonde wig played by Ajit, right? He would be some Westerner. He would come in an aeroplane. He'd take away idols and that sort of thing. Purab aur Pachim, Johnny Mera Naam. This is all Indira Gandhi's anti-Western things, right? Yeah. But it is always goes along. It goes along with the dominant method. Rare cases like Diwar. See, Diwar, who's the supposedly the person who's to be punished? The smuggler. But the point is, he uses stuff and makes you sympathize with the smuggler rather than with the policeman. The policeman shoots at a boy for stealing bread. You remember that scene? Sholay, why does Gabbar wear a uniform? Why does Gabbar wear a uniform? And why does the policeman always work alone? You never see seen in a police station. You never see the Thakur in the police station. You never see him always alone. Why? Because the police were detested in the height of the emergency, right? Okay. Uniform again. Okay. It is a this is my reading. Okay. It's a subversion of the sense of, uniform were detested in some way. Uniforms were hated. So you make the villain a uniform, right? So the question is, this is very rare. It happens very rarely. By and large, the thing is, dominant ideology is what is followed by popular cinema. This is true of Kannada cinema as well. It's true of every cinema. Kannada cinema will address a local public of some sort. So you're also dealing with local issues. Hindi is pan-Indian, right? Hindi is a pan-Indian cinema. Since it's pan-Indian, okay, deals with the national issues. It's much more national. Whereas your Kannada cinema will also have, see, for example, when look, Bhudayan Maga Ayu, right?
70s.
Bhudayan, yeah, Indira Gandhi, Devrajars, right? So Devrajars and Indira Gandhi are in tandem. So the question is, Bhudayan Maga Ayu, you have the feudal oppressor. You've got the Brahmin. No, the question is, when did Brahmins carry guns and go around? Okay, if you ask that question, obviously he's trying to bring Nishant and local issues together, and he has this Brahmin moneylender carrying revolvers, right? That sort of thing. So the point is, even the same thing with Benegal and all this. You must not see Ankur as a radical film. It is basically echoing the politics of the public politics of the Mrs. Gandhi era. Okay. If you are Mrs. Gandhi's politics was always, the rhetoric was always radical, right? Anti-feudal. Okay. So because it's anti-feudal doesn't mean that it is radical. So by and large, you can say that the cinema has towed the dominant line, but it's highly political in the sense it is selling things, for example, you look at something like Ganga Jamna. Have you seen Ganga Jamna? What is the thing? If you look at it, it's supposed to be radical, right? But the point is, in Ganga Jamuna, the dacoit is killed, okay, for some by his brother, and the brother is a policeman. He marries, the dacoit kills the money landowner, I think the zamindar or something. Isn't the zamindar? He kills the zamindar, right? But the point is, his brother, the policeman, marries the zamindar's daughter. What is that? It's a kind of unification of the state and landed gentry, right?
The
Nexus, okay. It's basically that, and he's celebrating that. So by and large, you could say that Hindi cinema is highly political, but it always follows a dominant politics. There is no room for radicalism in Indian popular cinema. I think even in art cinema, there's no room for radical politics, regardless of what people like Mrinal Sen claim to do.
In fact, you guys touched on gender. Probably follow this up with that question.
Yeah.
Around the fact that we see that women have even in women-centric films, leave aside the other films, we see in many cases routinely women are portrayed as victims. What do you think of this phenomenon? Do you think it's a perpetuation of a comfortable stereotype, or possibly it's a portrait of reality in a sense?
You're a marketing man. You should tell me that when you're selling, when I said, when cinema becomes a part of this economic and this kind of system, marketing system, what do you look at? You look at a common denominators. How does it sell for more number of people? It's not that, it's not ever a personal expression. Then when you're selling it for more number of people, you take those ideas, what we call it, the basic instincts. We work on, the sexuality, the violence, the kind of acceptance, as he said, dominant ideologies and acceptance. What I differ with him is that when dominant ideology is present, what is the form in which it is using? It is not using a political statement form. It is using through a cultural form, because people relate in India with cinema as a cultural relationship. They don't have this kind of readings within that. Analytical reading they don't make. They look at, for example, the Diwar itself or Gabbar Singh, Sholay itself. It is received as a cultural artifact. The music it gives to them, the kind of dialogues it gives to them, the kind of relationship they have with that. The same thing with that. Or when you are using basic instinct like sexuality and violence, other things, the kind of gaze, male gaze, what you talked about, is essentially the part of its selling. What do you sell? dominant ideology sells more. Today we have seeing it in politics as well today. Why does people take such extreme positions, right-wing positions? Essentially because it sells today, because they can get the political dividends they are looking for from that. Same way the cinematic dividends they were looking for is what they are going to get through this. That's my understanding.
Do you want to go first? Okay. So what I feel is that when it comes to gender, yes, women have been portrayed as the victims because I think that's how it was. I mean, that's been the reality. And but I also see in recent times with films like Gauri Shinde's English Winglish, with the regular housewife who's very patronizingly appreciated for the food she cooks. And she's not expected to do anything more. कि हाँ तुम अपना kitchen देखो, kitchen संभालो, and that's enough. You know, you don't have to do, and you're not capable of doing anything more. That's the assumption. That's the bottom line. And even if you do something more, like this I've experienced in real life, where people will tell you that you have to be thankful that the man allows you to do something more. I said, allow? I mean, it's my birthright, hello. You know, but in cinema, this seems to be now coming in small measure maybe, but yes, we do see the woman standing up for herself. Another recent film was Thappad, where it's just about a slap, and sometimes you feel ki, yeah, you know, as a woman also, when you look at the scene and the way they've handled it, that he doesn't mean to hit her. And very often you're tempted to take sides with them. Come on, you know, what are you making so much of it for? But it is so beautifully put across, where the woman is saying, no, it's not okay to be slapped, or anyone to be slapped is not okay. And as an audience, even an educated audience, a liberated feminine audience would also be tempted to take sides with the men, you know. And that, I think, is something that Indian cinema is having to fight, because it is so ingrained in our DNA that we can't allow ourselves to think any otherwise. And but that seems to be changing with films like this, that seem to be coming out. I think that's a wonderful move from the women being portrayed just as victims. Yes, they're being portrayed as victims, but they're also being portrayed as people who are standing up, and standing up not by, you know, they're confronting the system. They're not contributing to its collapse. They're not saying demolish the system. They are actually contributing in a very different but positive way, in a constructive way, to say, hello, we all need to coexist, we all need to go ahead. And I think that is a very important thing. And I'd also like to respond to something you said, where art is not the purpose of cinema. But I changed that to saying art is not the only purpose.
Yeah, the possibility, I've said, at the first.
It's not the only purpose, because I do see cinema as a culture keeper, you know, because I really think that if we didn't have, in urban areas, even in the rural, with the consumerist kind of way of life that we are indulging in now and live, the access to the arts has become lesser. It's become spectatorship. Whereas earlier it was participative. Where if there was a harvest festival, if there was sowing, you didn't have to have a festival only. As you did the activity, you sang, you danced. It was part of your life. As we moved to urban areas, we became more distant from that, right? I have people coming in the theater, youngsters who can't sing to save their life. Earlier in cinema, you had to know how to sing, you had to know how to dance, you had to know everything basically. You know, a KL Saigal had to know how to sing, a Devika Rani had to know how to sing, right? Now, later came the days of playback and all. But even then, if you know how to sing as an artist, you have a better sense of rhythm. You're not monotonous then. So that really made all the difference, right? And as culture keepers, I think cinema has played a great part, because today, if we have access to even folk music, there may be plagiarism, you might call it what you like, okay? It is based on something, and then creativity has been used to add to it, but it has kept it alive in some form. Today, there are people on the street who do not have access to various forms of entertainment, who were going to the cinema houses, who were watching a film, who would hum a tune if nothing else. And I remember I've had the great fortune of working with great filmmakers, bigwigs of their time. And the one common thing was, if you can hum a song, then Gana hit hai. Gana hit hai, to movie hit hai. That was the basic yardstick. And cinema, I feel, contributed to people singing. Today, if I have youngsters coming to me who can't hold a note to say, forget holding a note, just humming a tune to save their life. It's not happening. It's not happening. We in the theater, we are struggling. If we want to do a musical, my God, we're dead. So cinema, I feel, has been a culture keeper. Yes, there's no running away from politics. Yes, women have been portrayed as victims, but I think that is changing. That is changing slowly but surely, but it will always be a mirror of the current times, unless, of course, it's a period film and whatever else. But otherwise, there's no running away from being a mirror of the current political situation or the cultural situation, whether it is something that makes a statement on politics or gender of the times.
And I agree with all this, whatever you said, but I just want to talk about this notion of victimhood in Indian cinema, right? See, one of the things about Indian cinema is that it's constructed like a fable, right? It's like a fable. Every film has a message. It is not true of Hollywood. Hollywood films don't cram down messages in whatever. So the question is, in a fable, the fox has to be cunning, the monkey has to be mischievous, right? The point is, if the fox is schizophrenic, you won't have a fable, right? You can't confuse. So the result is that in Indian cinema, every single entity which is shown there has to have one meaning and one meaning only. A person with spectacles has to be scholarly. Young people have to be romantic, right? Okay. Terminally ill person can't be evil. Okay. So there are fundamental tropes. You have to go along with that. The victim that way is one of the things that the victim, essentialized. What the term would be, essentialized. So the question is, you have victims. For example, it is not possible, it seems to me, in Indian cinema to portray a Dalit as anything except poor and suffering, right? You go look at American cinema, you have black generals, you have black judges, you have black lawyers, you have black politicians, you have black, any number of people. And we know that any number of Dalits have risen up in the society to become powerful people, right? But you can't represent them as anything except victims in Indian cinema. Okay. This is a serious issue with Indian cinema. It is didactic in a certain way. Okay. It's didactic in a certain way. It seems to be constructed like a fable. So, okay, given these circumstances, women for a long time were portrayed as victims. Not Duniya Na Mane. See, the woman has to be portrayed as rebellious. Okay. But it's not that a woman who's a victim learns to rise up. That never happens. They're already conceived as rebellious in some way, independent in some way, which allows them in some way. You will never find a movie in which a woman is suffering for a long time and she's transformed into I can't recall any movie of that sort. She has to be conceived in essence in some way as rebellious or as independent, or she has to be conceived as a victim. It's on account of that you have this, if you look at the portrayal of victimization in Indian political cinema, art cinema I'm not talking in terms of popular cinema. You will not find a happy ending in an art film. Okay. You will not, Mrinal Sen's film, when was the last happy ending in a Mrinal Sen film? I don't know. Okay. I have serious doubts, right? It is not that you're pessimistic. It is that having conceived as a person as a victim, you cannot afford to see him rise. That's all. Okay. In conception, he's a victim, right? You cannot bear to see him rise. So your Indian political filmmakers are the most pessimistic in the world simply because they've conceived of these guys, victims, as victims. Okay. It's not a thing of transformation. Okay. Your Hollywood is based, your entire, the grammar of Hollywood is based on the notion of transformation of the individual from something to something else. In Indian cinema, it's based on the essence of things. Romantic people are romantic, suffering people are suffering, okay? Rich people are rich. When was the last time a rich man lost money in an Indian movie? Okay, when was the last time? Okay, never, okay.
In what? In what?
I'd like to-
It took an earthquake.
I'd like to add to this, this is a very interesting thing he has raised. As a curator, I have this problem, very serious problem. Most of the filmmakers come to me, sir, why don't you recommend this film to an international film festival abroad? I mean, this is not an Indian response I'm talking about. It's a global response to Indian cinema. How do I take this Indian cinema to an international film festival? Almost impossible, I'll tell you. Because there is an international film festival circuit, there's a concept of these kinds of notions about Indian cinema.
Yeah, correct.
That I can't take a thriller from India, even if it's very well made, to an international film festival. I can't take a middle class Indian, with a middle class environment within it, into an international film festival abroad. It has to be, as he said, a kind of a representational. There is a Western notion of Indian cinema in that. As a curator, I have very serious, even in my festival, when I receive films, most of the filmmakers will come, they'll make absolutely rotten film and say, but they'll say, sir, my film has so much rich, issues involved in that. This is an issue about gender, this is an issue about politics, you should take this is an art film. They demand that it is an art film. They won't even ask me whether I should look at it and decide whether I should take that film into my film festival. They will demand that, you see, I have dealt with gender issues, I've dealt with social issues. This is a very important issue that, how the Indian film is framed across the world. How it is framed within India is also very important, how it is framed.
Yeah.
And I was talking to you about the gender issue, that another issue, I was telling you that globally. The social order we can always assert, like what you're talking about. We are seeing things in a woman in the part of social order, we are seeing changes. But as a woman, the part of a natural order. People have to change attitudes, they have to look at it in a different way. That is not changing. That is what he talks about, dominant ideology within cinema. What does dominant ideology do? It has hierarchized even the natural order. Women are different from men. They don't accept that. Women is, as you said, they think that if reservation is given to women, it's as kind of a charity. It is not charity. Therefore, you have to look at women as a part of a natural order, not as a part of a social order where she is condemned to a certain roles which over a period they have been assigned to her. And that is looked at as the kind of the order we want to change. That can be changed. You can bring in laws to change all these things. But you can't make a film where the natural order is being questioned. Women had to be looked at as a natural person.
In a Mrilal Sen film, when its water is dripping in the monsoons in a poor man's house, it is never repaired.
Yes.
It never be repaired. Okay. It keeps dripping. Okay. So point is it cannot change because in essence, that is what it is.
Yeah, and the statement being made with that is not only is he poor, he's not even resourceful.
He's not capable of he's not,
He doesn't even have his own inner resources to do something.
Very interesting on Kannada film. It's a very major.
On that note, I'll probably have to.
Yeah.
Okay,
fine. It's 1 o'clock.
End of it. I love how the conversation has literally picked up a certain kind of momentum in this case. I feel absolutely, but as all things keep on dripping, conversations need to come to an end, so to say, for want of a bad. But yeah, thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. This, as I was expecting, and I hope it's been seen for the audience, this whole nice balance of an insider-outsider kind of a lens of Indian cinema is what I was really hoping for. Fingers crossed, and thankfully, I can be put on record to say that yes, I did take back a lot of interesting anecdotes, film recommendations, and quite a few question marks in my mind as we have the conversation.
He's a poet, Samantha. Actually, I want to read one, my feeling when I come out of the major films in Indian cinema, I'll just read one of your poems, 2 sentences. Its title is Let's Be Quiet, the problem with Indian cinema. Wrapped up by a blanket of sound. These are your words. The word bangs like a hound, barks like a hound. The air we breathe is full of noise. Now, Indian cinema, this is the most difficult thing when they take Indian cinema to international. It's always, they find it very noisy.
Noisy, yeah.
Very noisy.
There is no silent movie.
Yeah.
Silence, there's no silence. See, that is again the thing of the message, right? Look, in Queen, see, what is the first thing you go, for example, you do one minute. In Queen, you go abroad, right? You go abroad. What is the first thing you do in abroad? You hear sounds, right? You hear new sound, you hear this. In Queen, no, there is this crooning all the time. Ooh, some song, a Hindi song is going on, and we get crooning in the background.
It's the
Right?
noise. And
In Paris, you go, there is some Hindi crooning going on in the background, right? Paris and
let us
Amsterdam,
be
there's
quiet for
crooning
some
in the
time.
background.
That's what,
Now,
you
what is
endure.
this?
In fact, in the Indian cinema, we are looking for, to be quiet for some time and listen to the magic silence.
I think
On
it's
that note, we will have to call it a wrap.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so very much for such an enjoyable conversation. Thank you very
you.
much.
Thank you.